I don't even know what to say anymore. I really don't. I'm kind of perplexed all about this, the whole podcast scenario that's going on. Everybody want to start a podcast. Don't even know what to talk about. Podcast here, podcast. Just stop it, please. There's only one podcast that y'all should be listening to, and that's my main man, Josh Petrie, right here on the Sportsnerdz Podcast.
And now your host, my daddy, Josh Petrie.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Sportsnerdz Podcast, Episode 6. Got a big show lined up for you guys today. We're going to have two guests. As you guys know, I had the privilege of going up covering the Pitt-Louisville game on Sunday, and Pitt basketball is struggling a little bit right now, especially in ACC play. So my first guest is going to be Harry Paceris. He's a contributor to Pittsburgh Sportsnerdz.com, as well as a member of the Football and Basketball Writers Association of America, also known as the Pitt Guru, and he's agreed to be my Pitt insider, my go-to guy from here on out, so we'll get to him a little bit later in the program. My second guest will be Scott Grayson, Philadelphia Eagles beat reporter at 97.3 ESPN Radio and co-host of Mountaineer Game Day. I'm sure this guy's on cloud nine right now with the Philadelphia Eagles winning their first ever championship. And I got a couple questions to ask him. I want to know what the Eagles are going to do at the running back position, whether they will, kind of test the free agent market or kind of stick with the plethora of running backs they have. And I want to talk to him a little bit about Foles. But I won't hear a whole lot from me today. I'm going to talk a little NBA trade deadline, and I'll tell you about my trip to Pitt on Sunday. So we got a big show, so let's get to it. All right, so I made my way up good old I-79 from Charleston, Pittsburgh to the Louisville game on Sunday. Love going to Pittsburgh. Absolutely great place to see a basketball game. If you get a chance, you should check it out. The Pete is an awesome place to experience a basketball game. I would tell anybody that. Even though I am from West Virginia, I don't feel that hate for the Pitt program that a lot of people do, especially, now these kids and have nothing to do with some things that happened earlier in the backyard brawl. So you should put that hate aside and actually go check out a game. It's a great place. As far as the game itself goes, Pitt riding a 12-game losing streak, 0 in the ACC. Pitt basketball is not used to losing this much this often, I believe. And like I said, I'll get to the game itself here in a little bit. But after the game, a lot of people calling for Kevin Stallings' head. Kevin Stallings, as you know, came in after the untimely departure of Jamie Dixon going to TCU. Was it the right hire for this program? A lot of people thinks that it wasn't. They thought it wasn't a good fit. They thought they might go in another direction. Do I think it was a good hire? Probably not. But I also think it's unfair to call for his head right now after 2 years. I think you should wait another year. But if Pitt loses to Boston College tonight, then you may see him jump the gun and make a move. I want to bring Harry on here in a little bit also to talk about how the players feel about Kevin Stallings. Kevin Stallings can be a difficult guy. Anybody around him knows that. But as far as the game itself goes, Pitt started out with an 11-7 lead. They went 3 of 4 from three-point field goals. After that, the bottom absolutely fell out. They missed 13 of their next three-point field goals, and they went upwards of 12 minutes without a basket at all. During this time, Louisville went on a 31-6 run and never looked back. If you know about Louisville, you know the Patino debacle and things like that. But also one thing with this program is they're always going to be longer, leaner, and more athletic than most teams they play. But this is the ACC play, so you wondered if Pitt would make some adjustments at home after being blew out by this team earlier in the season. But, is it the freshman wall that Kevin Stallings speaks of? To me, it may be. Maybe these players need a couple more years for the game to slow down for them a little bit, for them to develop their footwork and their fundamentals. But you want to see guys like Brown being 6'10", get down and bang underneath, but maybe it is a freshman wall. There's also questions asked of whether this team is ACC caliber talent from top to bottom. I heard a lot of that after the game. So it's interesting what's going on in the Pitt program right now. So I want to bring Harry in and try to dig in and figure out, what's going on with the Pitt program. All right, my first guest this week on the Sportsnerdz Podcast is Harry Paceris, contributor to PittSportsNow.com, as well as a member of the Football and Basketball Writers Association of America, and also known as the Pitt Guru. And this guy is also, he's agreed to be my Pitt insider. He's going to be my go-to guy, so I appreciate that. So, Harry, what's going on, man?
Not too much, man. It's great to be on for the first time, and I'm ready to roll.
You got a pretty impressive resume. You know, I went down the list and was searching for some names and some guys to kind of hook up with and talk some Pitt athletics about. And, you stood out. You got a pretty impressive resume. Can you tell me a little bit about the Sportsnerdz.com and, a little bit about your background?
Yeah, in terms of myself, I joke around with people in Pittsburgh. I call myself an OG, an original gangster. I grew up with a family of recruitniks. Believe it or not, I come from a family of West Virginia Mountaineers, and they got me heavily into recruiting, and I launched a website called the Pitt Guru's Panther page. And as far as I know, and if you talk to anybody in Pittsburgh, it's the first Pitt recruiting site that was ever out there. Once Pitt realized how much traffic was coming through, they made me change my name right around my wedding date. And I started the sites for Rivals.com, jumped on, helped publish the Scout.com site, which is now defunct. But I've been at this now, well over 15 years, and I feel like I'm a pretty established name in terms of the Pitt sports scene, and I just love it. Recruiting's my forte. I just love it. And jumped on with Mike Vukovcan, who was formerly with KDKA up here in Pittsburgh, and we launched Pittsburgh Sports Now, and our niche is pretty incredible. We cover a tremendous amount in terms of content, in terms of football, basketball, wrestling, you name the sport, it's covered, recruiting extensively, and it's all done for free. All the content is free. We bring on advertisers, and the site's grown exponentially now over 2 years, and like I said, you can look us up at Pittsburgh Sports Now, PGH Sports Now, at PGH Sports Now on Twitter, and I'm at Pitt Guru.
All right, man. I appreciate it so much. I appreciate you calling in and being my Pitt insider. As you know, Pittsburgh played Louisville on Sunday, and I had the privilege to go up. I try to make it up to 2 or 3 games a year. I'm not gonna pretend like I'm really, really close to the program, as you are, but I do try to make it up 2 or 3 times a year to cover those games. But even without a basketball IQ, as far as Sunday's game goes, you know there's something to that. And as the game went itself, obviously Louisville won 94-60, and Pitt just got beat in every aspect of the game. Played a little better in the second half, but after the game, you heard a lot of chatter and things like that, especially on Kevin Stallings' end. Kevin Stallings making the comment that he just thinks, Pitt has the 5th youngest team in the country, and he just thinks that this team maybe hit a freshman wall. And I just wanted your take on that, because to me, watching Kevin Stallings' body language and things during the game, I don't know if he's dialed in this season. I heard a lot of chatter saying that he may not be a good fit, and maybe they're calling for his head right now. I don't think that's, I don't think that's fair after 2 or 3 years of being a coach there. But what do you think about Kevin Stallings, and do you think the program is headed in the right direction?
Well, let me go back, since it's my first time on, but I think it's critical here you go back. And first of all, I think most Pitt fans realize Jamie Dixon was the winningest Pitt basketball coach in the program's history. But when Pitt jumped to the ACC, things changed significantly. And I know that there was trepidation, paranoia on Dixon's part about going to the ACC. And all this is the success we had start really coming off the rails. Dixon found it extraordinarily difficult to recruit to the ACC, where in the Big East, New York, Philadelphia, D.C., we had certain hotbeds that Pitt would go to bring in talent. He was struggling, and many of the assistants that he brought in weren't, quite frankly, producing. So what's important to remember is when, at the time when they were considering going to Stallings, the program really had stagnated. Now, when I say that, Dixon was still winning 19 to 20 victories a year, but it was a given that if Pitt was in the tournament, they were an easy out. Rarely did they get past the first round. Where the animus and all the craziness and all the venom towards Stallings really started was the former athletic director was Scott Barnes at Pitt. And Barnes, former boss at the University of Washington, was a guy by the name of Todd Turner, and he ran a search firm called College Sports Associates. So from a Pitt perspective, Panther Nation, they thought, well, Jamie's out the door. They wanted young, they wanted aggressive, they wanted a new, fresh face. And it was an odd search in that very few names emerged. Usually something would come up. And out of the blue, Kevin Stallings' name came up. And I will tell you, the vitriol, the blowback from the fans was significant. And a lot of people start basically linking up Stallings with Todd Turner, who's part of the search firm. and really felt that there was never a proper search conducted. So the best way I could relate this, if anybody's followed football this year, Greg Schiano was hired at the University of Tennessee, and all heck broke loose. There was such a backlash on Twitter that their athletic director, right or wrong, had to go back and actually tell Schiano that he was no longer coming in as head coach. Well, imagine that scenario, but they're bringing the coach in. So Stallings has come in under this dark cloud of infamy ever since he was hired. If you go back to the initial press conference, it was exceptionally ugly. Usually press conferences are upbeat. The coach is allowed to kind of ingratiate himself and introduce himself. Literally the first question from one of the Pittsburgh media was come clean, because there was such venom towards the search, such trepidation, people wondering why there weren't other candidates involved. So Stallings from the get-go, unfortunately, and not really his fault, has walked into a very, very ugly situation, and it's been hard for him to win back really a lot of the fan base. He walked into a situation as well where there were basically four seniors, or I should say three seniors, four seniors, Ryan Luther, who was a junior, and a large group of players that never belonged in the ACC that Jamie Dixon brought in. And the two players that he had to rely on were Mike Young and Jamel Artis last year, and they were players that were far more concerned about padding their NBA resume as opposed to playing like proper teammates. They were considered senior leaders, yet they were suspended multiple times. So Stallings, who's already basically known for his temper, would butt heads with them quite a bit. It turned out to be a mediocre 16-17 season. It got very ugly. And I think what the staff felt is that they simply had to start from the ground up. And they had two options. Either go and bring in a slew of junior college players and add some freshmen to it, or go predominantly freshmen with maybe one or two junior college players, and that's the route they decided to go. All that being said, you saw what's happened this season when they hit the ACC. They have yet to win a game. They're athletically and physically overmatched. And to your point, I think what's happening, especially in some of these more recent games, freshmen tend to hit a wall. When you have seven freshmen on the team, you're looking at players that are simply worn down both mentally and physically. So it wasn't a team built for a tremendous amount of wins in the ACC, and unfortunately they have seen none. So you combine combine Pitt going winless in the ACC. You combine the vitriol that's almost constantly there with Stallings, and Pitt's athletic director, is in for a big decision. Now, you brought up an excellent point. They've only been there 2 years. This is year one of the rebuild with seven freshmen, and many of those freshmen, and I'm talking about Marcus Carr, Shamil Stevenson, Cam Davis, Terrell Brown, are better freshmen than anyone Jamie Dixon brought in the ACC. So, I'm not Heather Light, Pitt's athletic director. I have no clue what move she's going to make. What she's going to have to weigh is the potential for the team next year. And there are several players. There's Malik Ellison that will be available next year. There was a transfer from St. John's. Many say he's the best player on the team. They're bringing in a top 150 forward in Bryce Golden out of Pennsylvania. He's a big power forward. They're bringing in some pieces that may help them, plus a year of maturity. But you also have, they're averaging around 4,000 right now in attendance at the Peterson Event Center, where not that long ago they're averaging 10,000. So, it's a tough decision. It hasn't been the best fit with Stallings on board. But what I can tell you from my perspective, dealing with the staff, they do care about the program. You have tremendous assistants in Dan Cage, Kevin Sutton, working really hard. It's going to be a matter, I think, at this point of dollars and cents. Are they losing money to the degree where they should terminate him next year? On the flip side, do you want to see this team develop one more year, see what can happen? Plus, you have a $10 million buyout for Stallings. So there's a lot of big decisions ahead. Right,
and see, that leads me to my next question. As far as I don't agree with with calling for Stallings' head right now after I think it's been 2 years. I don't think that's fair. But and like you said, maybe after next year, maybe you make a move. But at the same time, is this roster from top to bottom fit for ACC play with the players right now? Because I heard a lot of that too, that they feel like outside of Stevenson and Carr and Brown, this roster is not fit for ACC play. So tell me your thoughts about that.
It's a great question. I think there are 4 or 5, and I should have included Parker Stewart. I think who really will be an exceptional player down the line. The core group that was brought in, I see that core group in my eyes is Stevenson, Carr, Davis, Stewart, and Terrell Brown. I believe are capable of playing at a higher level eventually in the ACC. So I do think, there's justification to take a second look at them next year, and that's assuming, and I'm assuming they will all come back next year. And not to mention, it should be, we should add that Ryan Luther, who was really the best player on the team and the lone senior, along with Jonathan Milligan, who's just a backup. Ryan Luther will be back next year as well, and that's a key piece that's missing this year. Many things have hurt the team this year. One is there is no inside presence.
See, that's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about, because, at this game, that's the main thing that stood out was, getting the ball in the paint and not doing anything with it. They wanted to kick it back out, and they settled for contested threes. And it seemed like when they got down a little bit to Louisville after, they started 3 or 4 from 3, and I think went on to miss their next 13. But it's like they started to panic a little bit. But do you see improvement with Brown and those guys on the inside going forward?
Do I see development? Do I see them getting better next year? Absolutely. This year, I feel for, and I'll say this too, even like Kenny Chukwuma, the kid plays his heart out. I think what you see is your typical team, and I'll go back to your typical Dixon years. The only freshman I've ever seen step in and dominate was DeJuan Blair.
Right.
It takes a few years for a player to develop, and by the end of their sophomore year, they start to flourish. Well, these players haven't had that luxury. Peace Ilagoma, who they have, can run the floor like a deer. He's nearly 7 foot. But Peace probably needs a good solid 2 years before he can perform. So potential, yes, absolutely. I see it in Brown. Brown has an ACC ability, an ACC body. But right now, they're worn out. You can see the lack of confidence, and they're simply getting out muscle. Another year in the weight room, another year of experience, we're going to have to see what happens. But I don't see anything in particular out of Brown and even Kenny Chukwuma that tells me that they can't compete in time in the ACC. But right now, I mean, they've just been thrown out. It looks like children playing amongst men at this point. And, there's nothing you could do. And in hindsight, instead of bringing in, maybe 7 freshmen, maybe they could have sacrificed 1 scholarship and brought in an experienced JUCO center to go along with, like, Jared Wilson frame and Ryan Luther. That might have helped quite a bit. The one miss I go back to, and this is a good example of what happened with Jamie Dixon, WVU has Sagaba Konate. I'm probably mispronouncing his name. But their physical young center, Jamie had him ready to commit. I actually sat right next to the kid when he came with his family for one of the official visits. For some reason, Jamie opted to go with Corey Madigat, a player that was a freshman last year. Madigat gained weight during the season, could barely grasp the ball when they threw it to him, and was essentially a bust. He went to a junior college. Had he opted to go with Konate, that's the type of player this year that really could have brought this team an elevated level of play, and possibly they could have stole 2 or 3 games. They don't have that player. So right now you have a bunch of young, thin, inexperienced centers that could get better in time, and I think a few will, but this season, unfortunately, it's just been painful to watch him play.
Right, and do you think Kevin Stallings is having trouble right now keeping this team engaged? Because for the most part, Pitt, the program is not used to losing like this, but do you think he's having any kind of issue keeping them engaged, and do you think they have his back?
The team has his back. I've interviewed every single player on that roster. The one thing I will tell you about the 7 they brought in, especially the freshmen, including Jared Wilson frame, these are very high character. They're very, very high character young men. I was impressed with each and every one of them. In fact, I got a chance to talk to Chauncey Billups, who is almost like a mentor to Cameron Davis, and was blown away with what he had to say about the young man. I think this team is sticking together. I do think they have their coaches back. I think what's happening is two things. A, I think they've hit the wall. The ACC, it's a rigorous style of play. You're playing tremendous teams night in and night out, and losing by anywhere from 20 to 40 points is taking a significant toll. So what I like about the team is it looks at least they're attempting to you see a little more energy than you did last year, where the team last year simply quit on Stallings. You're not seeing it this year, but what you're seeing is a team that is mentally and physically drained, and I can't fathom what's going to happen the final 5 games. In terms of Stallings, the other thing he's having to deal with, I can't put into context the sheer tidal wave of negativity that he is hit with on a regular basis, the staff is hit with, and the team is hit with. In fact, I just read an article, one of the players mentioned they're even starting to hear some negativity from other students on campus. So they're having to deal with this tidal wave of negativity. I know personally that when I tweet something positive about the team, I expect anywhere from 10 to 20 negative responses immediately within the next 5 minutes on Twitter. It just comes right out.
Right, absolutely.
If we tweet anything about a recruit, the recruit is almost directly tweeted by a multitude of Pitt fans with something negative to say, which never helps the recruiting process.
Right.
So he's having to shield these players from just overwhelming amounts of negativity as well.
Right, and finally, during this game itself, I'm sure you kept a close eye on the game, but there was a lot of times, I didn't see. That's why I ask about, whether he's keeping these players engaged, because I didn't see a whole lot of effort at times and things like that, but yet at the same time in the second half they played better. I think the score was 49-40 in the second half. So that's what led me to the question of keeping their engagement and things like that, and as far as if they have Stallings back.
Yeah, a lot of these games, it's interesting. I will say this. It seems like Groundhog Day. They'll hit a bunch of threes, and they'll be in the game in the beginning for a period of time. Then there is a significant lapse of scoring. In fact, that last game, I think, went on for almost 10 minutes, which was hard to believe. And then, usually there's a flourish in the second half, and they get bested at the end. I mean, it's almost like a repeat scenario every single time. I don't know. I hate to say that there's no effort. Again, I think at this point, especially in the second half of a lot of these games, I think this team is mentally and physically exhausted. This is the first year for, when you think about it, 3/4 of that team. It's the first year in the ACC and playing an ACC schedule. And I think that's why, for a while, even against teams like WVU and a few others, you saw some closer games. You're just not seeing it at this stage of the season. I mean, they played Boston College tonight. A few fans think there's a chance they'll win. We'll see. But I think the fatigue is really hitting home at this point, and it's going to be difficult for them to win a game the rest of the season.
All right. Well, Harry, I really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you agreeing to be my go-to guy as far as Pitt athletics go. And, a lot of people around W and around Morgantown and things like that, how they feel about Pitt. But I tell people all the time, the Peterson, that's a great place to see a basketball game. I mean, it really is, one of the better ones I've been to. It's just a great place to go. But, I appreciate so much you coming on. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Absolutely. Have me on any time. You take care.
Thank you. You too. Okay, time for the NBA portion of the podcast. Still working on those segues. Like I said, working on a couple funny things to get us transition more efficiently from segment to segment. So I hope to have those in the next couple weeks. As far as the NBA trade deadline goes itself, just when you thought I could go a week and not talk Cavs basketball, who makes the biggest splash at the trade deadline? Cleveland Cavaliers. I mentioned that I knew they would be sellers at the trade deadline, but no, if you said you've seen this coming, you're lying. Nobody's seen this coming. You knew they would move guys like Shump and Channing Frye, but who thought we would move Dwayne Wade and Derrick Rose? You always knew that LeBron would bring over Carmelo Anthony or Dwayne Wade, one of his best friends. You knew it would happen. But like Dwayne Wade said, sometimes it just doesn't work. And we absolutely seen that with this team. This team just did not mesh. I love Isaiah Thomas, but he wasn't a good fit at all, and yet he feels slapped in the face that he got moved. But the best thing for Isaiah Thomas to do is just keep his mouth shut and play ball. Isaiah Thomas is not happy unless, it's his team. Sacramento was his team. Boston was his team. And Cleveland obviously wasn't his team, and I don't even think L.A. is going to be his team. So we'll see how he works out there. But you just didn't see this coming. Jordan Clarkson, you heard his name mentioned last year coming over, finally made it over. Larry Nance, as a Cavs fan, you knew that his dad played there. He made the comment before the season that he wanted to write his own destiny. He didn't want to, walk in his dad's footsteps, following his dad's footsteps, but it's kind of refreshing to see him in a Cavs uniform. Still missing that big guy. Nance is a big guy, yes, but I thought for sure we weren't allowed to trade the first pick until after the trade deadline. Yet I thought we would still move Tristan Thompson, J.R. Smith to bring in DeAndre Jordan, but that's not going to happen because LeBron is, the team is playing rejuvenated. He's absolutely ecstatic with these teammates right now. They're learning on the fly. They're flying around the ball, and he is absolutely happy. And first of all, LeBron, like I said 1,000 times, LeBron is not leaving Cleveland. It would tarnish LeBron's legacy if he left now. That's not going to happen. They would absolutely torch LeBron's house or any belongings, he may leave behind if he did leave, but it's not happening. So we don't even have to talk about that. George Hill, I mentioned that we would probably get him. George Hill plays 0D. You seen last night against Oklahoma State, still having trouble with the big guys like Steven Adams, still having trouble rebounding the ball and things like that, whether size. Kevin Love being 6'10". Kevin Love is not a banger. Said this 1,000 times. Do I think this team, yeah, they might have fun and fly around and be rejuvenated, and LeBron gets what LeBron wants for LeBron to stay in Cleveland, but is it enough to beat the Houston Rockets or the Golden State Warriors right now as the team stands? Still don't think so. So maybe some of you guys can leave me some comments or things like that and tell me if you do think this team is enough to get over the hump and get another finals championship. But like I said, regardless of what happens, I'm happy to just have one. But it is kind of refreshing to see this new rejuvenated team and how they play. They're having fun out there, and I think they'll continue to get better during the season, but set up for a deep run, I don't think so. Outside of the Cavs, not much to mention. You've seen Blake Griffin move to Detroit. Didn't think he would be happy in Detroit, but he has absolutely rejuvenated himself. He's having fun. His intensity's back, and he's just a beast right now. Other names, Dante Cunningham, Devin Harris, Tyler Zeller, some other guys on the move, but what the Cavs did is one for the ages. Nobody's seen this coming. But outside of that, not a whole lot to talk about. Let's get to my Philadelphia Eagles beat reporter, Scott Grayson, coming up.
The offense better around him, and it worked in everybody's favor there in Philadelphia. And, that's the thing I think that they did really well was they listened to Foles and identified what he can do well, what he likes to run, the kind of things he wants to do. And it made him more comfortable, made the team around him more comfortable, and everybody benefited. And I think it kind of laid a blueprint of how you can be successful if you lose a starting quarterback. You got to make sure you don't try to run the same offense that maybe is not geared quite as well for another guy as it is your franchise or your starting quarterback.
And, some questions are still there as far as they remain at the running back position. What do you see going forward as far as that with 32-year-old LeGarrette Blount? You've got a plethora of running backs there. So what can we see with all those guys?
Yeah, well, you add Darren Sproles potentially back into the mix, too. They definitely have a boatload of running backs forward. Now, LeGarrette Blount's contract is up. The question is, will they look to bring him back? In my opinion, I thought Blount was very good at the beginning of the season. He got flat in the middle of the season, almost seemed like maybe he wore down a little bit. And then with the addition of Jay Ajayi, it allowed him to kind of rebuild himself. And against New England, he played an excellent game. It's certainly, a chip on his shoulder going into that game, the way he played too. But you look at Darren Sproles again. Here's a guy. Are they going to sign him back? Will they have him back? He wants to play again. He's getting up there. He's a demon on punt returns. I mean, he's just lethal. But, Corey Clement really showed that he could be, a very serviceable and very good back as a young guy this year. And then you've got Wendell Smallwood coming back healthy, a former West Virginia guy. And it's just going to be interesting to see what they do there. There's definitely going to be a lot of competition. I do not think they will bring LeGarrette Blount back. He's just another Jay Ajayi. I think they'll look to do more with Corey Clement. Wendell Smallwood kind of fits in between the two guys as the kind of back that he is, if he can get in here and stay healthy and perform. And then you could have Darren Sproles or Kenyon Barner, probably one or the other. So that's how I think that the backfield will kind of shake out, in the spring.
Right, and it's not looking like they're wanting to be very, very active in the free agent market. So do you think guys like Smallwood has what it takes to be inserted in and, try to stay healthy with all these nagging injuries that he's had? Do you think he has the capability of being in there?
I think he does, partly because this coaching staff likes to, to me it seems like they like to give second chances and things like that. Look, the guy got hurt, and then he lost his spot because Corey Clement started playing lights out. But Smallwood came in this league with a lot of hype, with a lot of potential, and I think the Eagles are going to definitely look to see if they can get that out of him. He's still on his rookie contract. They're not having to pay him a lot of money, so they're definitely going to look at seeing what they can get out of him in the spring if he gets healthy and seeing if he can fit into what they try to do in the fall. He's got the skill set. And, I talk to him occasionally throughout the season. He's got the mentality that he wants to go out there and prove that he can play, that he can do this. But he knows he's got to stay healthy, and it's been a challenge for him. So that's going to be the number one thing he's got to overcome.
With Frank Reich's departure, who replaces him at offensive coordinator? Do you promote someone like Deuce Staley, or do you go out and find somebody?
Now, Deuce is the guy I think will ultimately get it. Doug Peterson does like to promote from within. And so I would expect that it will be either him or the wide receivers coach, Mike Groh. Those two guys seem to be the two that are, kind of bubbling up to the top as the names to watch. But Deuce has been here a long time. He did a great job handling the running backs this past season and in the past since he's been here. He was a player here in Philadelphia. So I think that, to me, Deuce Staley is likely going to be the offensive coordinator, and we'll see what they fill in between, behind him.
All right. Well, again, congratulations on the Super Bowl win. I really appreciate you calling in today, Scott.
Yeah, no problem, Josh.
All right. I look forward to talking to you soon.
All right, you got it.
All right. Thanks. All right. That'll do it for the Sportsnerdz Podcast, Episode 6. I want to apologize for the little technical difficulty we had there while talking to Scott Grayson. We won't let that happen again. But just to take you back, kind of pick that conversation up after the first question I asked him. But that question was what the Eagles do with Nick Foles. Do you keep Nick Foles next year? Do you insert him as a starter? Do you keep him on the bench, or do you let him go where he can get paid and start somewhere else? He said that Carson Wentz is the man of that organization. And even if Nick Foles has the Eagles sitting at 5-0, 6-0 whenever Wentz comes back, that Wentz will be inserted right back in as a starter. Foles knows that, and everybody else in an organization. So just want to take you back and let you know what we discussed there before we picked it up due to that technical difficulty. And like I said, won't let it happen again. Also want to thank my guest, Harry Paceras, the PittsburghSports.com contributor. The guy knows his stuff about Pitt athletics, and he's going to be my go-to guy and my Pitt insider. So we'll be talking to him again soon. Want to announce that the podcast is also on iHeartRadio. Absolutely happy to have that on there. Obviously, that's something that you work for. So really, really happy with that. Also on iTunes and SoundCloud, Podbean, Stitcher. Sportsnerdz Podcast is anywhere you can imagine. We try to put it out there everywhere. I appreciate everybody's support for listening. I hope you continue to listen and join us next week for Episode 7. And I'll announce, just like always in the coming days, who that guest will be. So again, thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you next week.